Show team, it's time for the Daily Detangler. So I was reflecting on the stone soup story again, and there's this one particular scene in the story where the travelers are hungry and they are wandering through the wilderness, and they're tattered and they're torn and they're running out of supplies, and they get to the hilltop and they look around, and this is the picture that's shown during the story, and it doesn't last very long, it doesn't stay up very long, but this is an image that I remembered and I wanted to double click into, because they asked themselves, what can we do? What can we do? And they looked off into the horizon, and they scanned their environment, and they did something. They made a choice, right? So this is like I don't know, I draw a comparison to me, like the hero's journey, and this idea that there's going to be a current state situation, and the hero has to cross the threshold. So this is a threshold moment, and I wanted to unpack that. And these travelers, what they did to me, what it looked like was, and what it felt like was, they were recognizing the present situation. And what did they do? They observed, and they made a decision, and they acted, and they thought about what to do, and then engaged. So when they are hungry and they're tired, they took a moment and they looked around. They observed. And I see a lot of observations coming in from the team lately, which is awesome. I'm really energized by it. I can't respond to every single one, but I'm trying to process all of them. And we've got Mercedes giving comments on detanglers, and we've got Clarity chiming in with what he sees on systems. We've got Architect Angles. We've got Activator with interviews happening about stone soup. We've got detanglers, and then people giving me side feedback. It's just a flywheel effect of observations. And then obviously we're doing our daily activities around these forms that have to do with different types of presentations and discussions and scenarios, and we're processing all this together. And these are inputs, and these travelers, they also had inputs, right? They had a lot of inputs. They had their environment, they had the weather, they had what was in their backpack, they had their clothes, right? They had the time of day, and they observed. And look at this picture for a second here, right? What's the difference between these two? What's the difference? Well, this one is, it's a business suit, and there's two options here that involve a choice. There's the choice of the past, and maybe what's happened to these travelers, and then there's the choice of the future and trying to forecast what should happen or what will happen and make assumptions. And then there's the choice of being in the present and being in the now. And that's sometimes difficult for me. And when I put my business suit on, I live in the past too much. I think about what happened to me in the past, or how I surfaced an idea in the past, or how I couldn't keep up, or how a concept didn't land, or whatever. Or I think about the future and what will happen and what should happen and what I'm entitled to, or what decisions will be made around go to customer at IQVIA, and how big is this going to get? How fast will it get? Right. And I can get anxious. And the thing about the past and living in the past or thinking about the past is that to me is where my doubt comes from. My doubt comes from thinking about the past. And if I think about the future too much, that's where a lot of my anxiety comes from, trying to forecast it. So, these kids, they lived in the moment, and, you know, they stayed in the moment, and they observed in the now. And, the present is now, the moment is now for these travelers. So then what happened? Well, they gazed their eyes, right? They looked around, and they had to make a decision, and they decided to do something. And not living in the past, not being anxious about the future, but staying in the now. They made a decision, and that decision is like what we've talked about in our scientific methods. It's psychology, and they did it together in a group. So it's like sociology meets psychology. But what happened? I mean, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, and from the video Being Brilliant Every Day, we know that our inputs and our physiology can impact how we feel, and that those feelings are always there. We always feel something because we're human. And then that turns into our emotion, which is, energy and motion. And all of these are present, I imagine, in these travelers. Like I can empathize with their plight, and they're starving and they're hungry, and maybe they're alone. They feel alone even though they're together. Or maybe they're feeling frustrated or angry even. Maybe they're sad, like their parents, maybe their parents are gone and they're just sad and lonely and disappointed. And they have a decision they can make. And they have a choice. And the choice that they're making to pick up their eyes and gaze and look around, where does that come from? It comes from the filter that they have. It's we've talked a lot about this, their mindset, the mindset shifts that they have gone through, and the way that they view the world and how they process information, which is bias, right? That bias has to do with this idea of how do they process information, and what conclusions can they draw, and how do they broaden their perspective, and what's their filter that they filter their feelings and their emotions and their inputs through. And then they decide that they're going to act. They decide that they're going to do something. They don't wallow in the situation. They don't, feel sorry for themselves. They don't start, thinking about and talking about their childhood because they're kids. And, they don't wallow in the past. So this is like, the mindset frames out our thinking, and then that mindset helps us engage to get results or make an impact. And in this case, it helped them because of the way that they processed the information, they filtered it, and they decided to act. They didn't take on too much. They took a first step, and they said, "Oh, there's a town. Let's go there." That's literally the first step. Recognizing there's a town and saying, "Hey, let's go there." It's just a first step. And they just took the first step to walk up to town. And I woke up this morning and I thought, that's a simple act. But look at what it set in motion. From their observation, they took the first step. And there's a lot of ways that observation could have went. And if you pattern this out, they could have said, well, we've analyzed this town. This town's like every other town we've passed. And, it's these people, they're all the same. And we're never going to be able to do this. And, we should have ate 3 hours ago or 3 days ago. And we're past our deadline of eating. So this is just a waste. And, I can't check this off and look at this town, and it's not going to work. Right. And it's kind of like this project plan isn't going to pan out. That's one action or activity they could have went through, is like all of these expectations around a result. And that could have, what would that have done? It would have probably done what it's done to me in the past, which is kind of paralyzed me from taking that baby step. Right. Like this is a roadblock, but it's in the name of getting results. And then, we talked about this idea of focusing on the outcome and what's possible, and saying the opposite and thinking about the opposite and deciding to act in the opposite way. Right. And this is a muscle memory thing, but, okay, well, this is my situation. Let me synthesize all of these inputs, and then ask myself, what would progress look like? What would progress towards eating look like? Well, it would probably be something like, we should probably go into town. Let's take that first step. And then that first step and taking that first step becomes how we measure progress. And then, how do we discover the right practice instead of repeating best practice? The left side would say, well, best practice tells us that we're supposed to make soup this way. And it's a huge burden because they can't make soup the way everybody else does. But on the right side, it's like, how do we discover what's right for us in the moment based on what we've observed? And the progress becomes the pursuit of the outcome and doing what's possible and learning to tackle the problem. And that's quite a difference. It's like on the backward bike. What if Dustin said, hey, here's what everybody else does to ride a bike. I'm going to try it this other way. Oh, that's a failure. I failed. So my analysis tells me that because there is no best practice for backward bike and nobody's done it before, I can't do it. I can't do it. So, what would have happened if Dustin didn't try? What would have happened with the 4-minute mile? What would have happened with Elon Musk trying to get to, space? What would have happened if Jeff Bezos decided not to sell books? Those types of things. Our future would be different because they were living in the past. And they didn't take that first step to be curious and engage. So that's, to me, what trusting the process is all about, and our process for determining and figuring out how to pursue an outcome together. We're going to decide to engage and pursue an outcome, and we're going to be present and to make observations. And that's the process, and trusting the process creates stone soup, and resting in that. And the title of this detangler is recognizing the present. And what if the present is what we discover in the now? Thanks so much for joining the Daily Detangler today and listening to it. I'll see you tomorrow.